Hello students, I am Dr. Pooja Mehta from Inder Kumar Gujral, Punjab Technical University, Kapurthala, Punjab. In the earlier module, we did content theories of motivation. We discussed that content theories of motivation focus more on the relevance of intrinsic needs in the process of motivation. Various researchers like Maslow, Elderfer, Herzberg, and McClelland pointed out the reality of human needs and their role in activating and energizing human behavior. But sadly, all content theories treated all employees alike, all situations alike, and assumed that there is only one best way to motivate the employees. The content theories did not take into consideration individual differences and hence uniqueness of individual needs. Therefore, in recent years, a different approach to understand the concept of motivation has emerged out. This approach constitutes process theories of motivation. Process theories of motivation view motivation as an individual's decision to act in a particular manner. Process theories of motivation try to identify the variables that influence an individual's level of motivation and the relationship between such variables. Classification of process theories of motivation. There are 4 process theories of motivation: expectancy theory, equity theory, performance satisfaction model, and goal setting theory. We will discuss each theory one by one in this module. Students, we are now going to discuss first process theory of motivation, expectancy theory. The expectancy model of motivation was propounded by Victor H. Vroom. This theory is classified as process theory because the theory attempts to identify the relationship between the variables which affect individual behavior. Vroom's expectancy model established that motivation of an individual depends upon the strengths of his expectation that a certain act will lead to desirable outcome and the degree to which that outcome is preferred by the individual. Major contribution of this theory in the concept of motivation can be described in terms of identification of various forces that motivate an individual to perform on the job. There are 3 variables which are explained by the expectancy model. First variable is valence, second variable is expectancy, and the third variable is instrumentality. This model postulates that motivation is multiplier of all of these 3 variables. Therefore, in order to motivate an individual, all of these 3 variables must have positive values. If any one of these variables becomes 0, motivation level of that individual will also be 0. Now we are going to discuss the 3 variables one by one. Valence. Valence refers to attraction of the outcome to an individual. Valence is the strength of an individual's preference for a particular outcome or reward. Valence is a subjective phenomena and therefore it varies from person to person. Value of valence ranges between -1 to +1. If an individual prefers to achieve some outcome, in that case, valence will be positive. If an individual does not prefer to achieve certain outcome, in that case, valence will be negative. And valence will be 0 if an individual expresses indifferent attitude towards the achievement of the outcome. Therefore, it can be said that in order to motivate an individual for certain outcome, valence of the reward associated with the outcome must be positive for that very individual. Now we will discuss the first variable of Vroom's expectancy theory, which is expectancy. Expectancy is also called effort performance probability. It refers to the extent an individual believes that certain level of efforts made by him will lead to the achievement of desired level of outcome or completion of the task. Since it is a probability, its value will vary from 0 to 1. If an individual believes that probability of achieving the desired level of performance is 0, that is, if an individual feels that he will not be able to achieve certain level of performance, no matter how hard he works, he will not even try to put efforts. On the other hand, if a person believes that probability of achieving the desired level of performance is positive, he will try more harder to achieve the desired level of outcome. Second variable is instrumentality. Instrumentality is also called performance reward probability. Instrumentality is the expectation of an individual that his performance will lead to desired reward associated with the performance. Instrumentality also varies from 0 to 1. Instrumentality will be positive if an individual believes that after achieving the desired level of performance, he will get the rewards associated with it. Whereas instrumentality will be 0 if a person believes that desired level of performance will not lead to desired rewards. Vroom's expectancy model is described in the exhibit given here. In this exhibit, we can see that first level outcome is the performance and second level outcomes are the rewards associated with the performance. This diagram explains the relationship between motivational force, expectancy, and instrumentality. If an individual believes that a particular level of effort will lead to the desired level of performance, that is, if he believes that by putting certain level of efforts, he will be able to achieve first level of outcomes, only then he will be motivated to put efforts. Further, if he believes that first level outcomes will lead to second level of outcomes, that is, if he believes that by obtaining particular level of performance, he will get the rewards associated with it, only then he will be motivated to perform that very level of performance which is required to achieve the rewards. Critical analysis of Vroom's expectancy model. Vroom's expectancy model was appreciated on the following grounds. This model is very useful in understanding organizational behavior. This model also explains how individuals' behavior is influenced by his goals. This model is a cognitive theory which assumes that human beings are rational. They can anticipate their goal achievement and amount of efforts required to achieve those goals. This theory also says that motivation is not just about the satisfied and unsatisfied needs of individuals. Efforts made by an individual can result in achievement of desirable rewards, which in turn will improve the level of motivation. Despite of these advantages, the model also suffers from some limitations. Now we will discuss those limitations. This theory is very complex and hence it is very difficult to practice in the organization. The theory assumes that human being to be rational who makes all decisions consciously. But in reality, so many decisions are taken without conscious thoughts. The next theory of motivation is equity theory of motivation. Equity theory of motivation was proposed by J. Stacy Adam. This theory is the most popular and developed version of equity. It is based on the simple assumption that all individuals expect to be treated fairly. According to this theory, equity is the perception of employees that they are treated equally as compared to the others, and inequity is the perception of employees that they are treated unfairly as compared to the others. Employees always assess what they get from the job against the inputs they put into the job. They also compare their outcome input ratio with the outcome input ratio of other relevant individuals, which means that employees always tend to compare their level of efforts and salary with the other people in the organization. If individuals perceive that their outcome input ratio is equal to the outcome input ratio of others, that is, if they feel that they are getting salary equal to the others, in that case, state of equity will prevail. But if an individual perceives that his ratio of outcome to input is unequal, that is, if the employee feels that he is overpaid or underpaid, in that case, state of inequity will prevail. We can see the state of equity and inequity with the help of these equations. In the first equation, individual's outcome input ratio seems to be equal to the outcome input ratio of the other person with whom the individual is making comparisons. In this case, state of equity exists. In the second case, individual finds his outcome input ratio more than the outcome input ratio of his referent. In this case, inequity prevails because the individual is overpaid. In the third equation, individual's outcome input ratio is lesser than the outcome input ratio of his referent. In such case, inequity exists because of the employee is underpaid. The theory suggests that there are 4 possible comparisons which an employee makes with others. These comparisons are discussed as follows. First comparison is self-insight. This comparison happens when an employee compares himself with his own previous experiences at some different position in his current organization. Next comparison is self-outside comparison. Self-outside comparison states that when an employee compares himself with his own previous experiences at some different position outside his current organization. Third comparison is other inside. This type of comparison describes when an employee compares himself with another individual inside his organization. Fourth comparison is other outside. This is the comparison when an employee compares himself with another individual in some other organization. The theory of equity postulates that when an individual perceives the feeling of inequity, he will be motivated to reduce inequity. Not only those who experience inequity feel motivated to reduce it, but even those who experience equity will be motivated to maintain it. In order to reduce the feeling of equity, an individual may choose the following alternatives. The first alternative is changing the input. A person can change the level of inputs he is putting in his job depending upon the feeling of equity or inequity. Second alternative is changing the outcome. A person may request the management to increase his outcome if he feels it inequitable. Third alternative is change the perception of self. Instead of altering the inputs or outcomes, individuals may change their perception about themselves. For example, if they are overpaid, they can feel as if they are paid more because their tasks and assignments are more challenging. Change the perception about others. In order to reduce the feeling of inequity, people can change their perception about others. For example, if a person feels that he is getting more salary than others, he may start thinking like the other person's job is not contributing enough in the organization. That is why he is getting more salaries than others. The another alternative is choose a different person from comparisons. If comparing one with a specific person results in the feeling of inequity, one can also choose somebody else for the purpose of comparisons. The last alternative is leave the situation. A person may finally withdraw himself from the situation which produces the feeling of inequity. Now we will discuss critical analysis of equity theory. Critical analysis of equity theory will include advantages and as well as disadvantages of this theory. Equity theory adopted a realistic approach of motivation in an organizational context. The theory proposed that individuals are not only concerned with the rewards they get for their efforts, but also fair treatment they get in comparison to the others. The theory recognized the importance of self and social comparison in the process of motivation. It also assumes that motivation is not just based on the actual circumstances, but perceived circumstances also matter a lot. But in reality, this concept of equity is not preferred by all. Many difficulties may have to be countered while implementation of equity theory. For example, how does a person will choose different person for comparisons? How can management evaluate an individual's perception regarding input-outcome ratio? Due to such difficulties, this theory becomes very complex and difficult to implement. The next theory which we are going to explain is Porter's and Lawler's performance satisfaction model of motivation. Porter and Lawler gave an inclusive theory of motivation. The theory explained that an individual's motivation, level of performance, and satisfaction are separate variables, but they are related to each other in different ways. Porter and Lawler's model of motivation matches the Vroom expectancy model to a large extent. This model can be explained with the help of the figure given here. The figure clearly shows that this multivariate model of motivation explains the relationship between effort, performance, and satisfaction. It is very important to notice here that effort leads to performance, but the relationship between effort and performance is not direct. The relationship between effort and performance is influenced by individuals' abilities and traits, and also by the perception about the role he is performing. Further, the desired level of performance results into the intrinsic rewards and extrinsic rewards associated with the performance. But perceived equitable rewards determine the level of satisfaction of an individual, which means that if the person feels that he is getting equal rewards, only then he will be satisfied. But if he feels a sense of inequity in terms of rewards received, in that case he will not be satisfied. This model is based on the following assumptions. The model assumes that employees are rational beings who take decisions very consciously. All employees have different needs, desires, and goals. Individual behavior is determined by a combination of situational factors, environmental factors, employees' traits, and perception about the role. The variables explained by this model are discussed as follows. The first variable given by this model is effort. Effort refers to the energy which an individual put to perform his job. The second variable given by this model is value of reward. Value of reward refers to the degree of attractiveness of rewards associated with the performance. The third variable is perceived effort reward probability. This probability refers to the probability that certain level of effort will lead to desired level of performance, and further probability that the performance will lead to certain kinds of rewards. If the probability is positive, only then individuals will decide to put certain level of efforts. Another variable of this model is performance. Performance is the outcome of efforts made by an individual. The level of performance is influenced by abilities, traits, and individual's perception about his role. Abilities of an individual include knowledge, skills, and intellect to perform the job. Fifth variable of this model is rewards. Performance leads to two types of rewards: intrinsic rewards and extrinsic rewards. Intrinsic reward is inner feeling of achievement and accomplishment associated with the performance. Extrinsic rewards are given by the organization in the form of incentives, recognition, and promotion. Last variable of this model is satisfaction. Satisfaction will result from both intrinsic as well as extrinsic rewards, but the level of satisfaction will be determined by the perception of an individual that he is getting the rewards which he actually values or needs. Porter's and Lawler's model is very important for managers as it provides some guidelines to motivate the employees. These guidelines are: number one, before assigning the job to an individual, his abilities and traits must be matched with the requirements of the job. This model suggests that role of an individual should be carefully defined to them and ensured that they understand their role very clearly. The level of performance expected by the employee should be conveyed to him in concrete terms, and it should be ensured that expectations are realistic and attainable. The model also provides that we should always ensure that rewards associated with the performance are valuable to the employees. The next theory which we are going to discuss is goal setting theory. The goal setting theory of motivation was given by Edwin Locke. This theory proposed that an individual's intentions to work towards a goal are the major source of motivation to an individual. Goals motivate an individual to a great extent than any other variable. Goal setting theory emphasizes on the following main points. First is, if an individual accepts the difficult task, he will work harder to achieve high level of performance. Second is, individuals perform better when feedback is given to them regarding how well they are progressing towards their goals. This is because feedback helps in identifying the gaps between the desired performance and the actual performance. Goal setting theory also proposed that if employees are allowed to participate in the process of goal setting, they will be committed more to their goals. This is because people always express high level of commitment to the tasks which are assigned to them with their consent rather than arbitrarily. Goals define in concrete terms what an employee is supposed to do and how much efforts are required to put. Goal setting theory suggests that specific goals increase the performance than generalized goals. In addition to this, difficult goals, if accepted by an individual, result in higher level of performance than the easy goals. This theory also recommends that feedback about the performance leads to improved performance of an individual. Therefore, as per this theory, feedback constitutes the significant element in the goal achievement. The goal setting theory further suggests that in addition to the feedback, following factors influence goal performance relationship. The first factor is goal commitment. Goal setting theory assumes that employee is committed to the goal. That is, he believes that he will be able to attain the goal and he wants to attain the goal. The commitment will be higher when the goals are made public and when goals are assigned with the consent of the employee rather than arbitrarily assigned by the boss. The second factor is self-efficacy. Self-efficacy refers to the belief of an individual that he is competent enough to perform the task. More will be the self-efficacy, more will be the confidence of an individual that he will be able to accomplish the task. The third characteristic of goal setting theory is task characteristics. The goal setting theory cannot be implemented on every type of task. The goals substantially affect the performance when tasks are simple, well learned, and independent. After discussing all the three factors, we can summarize that difficult and specific goals are a good source of motivation and can lead to higher level of performance. But while implementing this theory, managers must ensure that goals assigned to the individuals are aligned with the organizational goals. So, dear students, let us now summarize. In recent years, a different approach to understand the concept of motivation has emerged out. This approach is called process theories of motivation. This approach views motivation as an individual decision to act in a particular manner. Process theories of motivation try to identify the variables that influence individuals' level of motivation and also the relationship between such variables. Process theories of motivation include Vroom's expectancy theory, Adams' equity theory, Porter and Lawler performance satisfaction model, and goal setting theory. Vroom's expectancy theory explained that motivation is the function of three variables: valence, expectancy, and instrumentality. Adams' equity theory explained that individuals have a basic drive to be treated fairly and their level of motivation depends upon the perception of equity. Thirdly, Porter and Lawler models of performance satisfaction discussed the role of individuals' abilities, traits, and role perception in the relationship between efforts, performance, and satisfaction. Lastly, goal setting theory, which we discussed in this module, explained that difficult and specific goals are a good source of motivation and can also lead to a higher level of performance.